Hey guys, welcome to diykraftz.
In this video, I'm going to show you a step-by-step tutorial of making this Crochet Diamond Granny Square. It is very easy to make if you just understand the concept of color changing and the idea of making a basic granny square. It can be used to make ponchos, handbags, cardigans, purses and many more. So let's get started. For this I am using 4-ply acrylic yarn and a crochet hook of size 4 mm. However, you can choose your favorite yarn and its suitable hook size. For the center I am beginning with this yellow color yarn and make chain 5. That's chain 3, 4 and 5. Now into the first chain make a slip stitch to form a ring. And here we have a center. Now let's start making row 1. Begin with chain 3 and into the center make 2 double crochet stitches. And this first chain 3 is considered as a double crochet stitch in our first stitch. Now we have 3 DCs. Now chain 2 and this chain 2 forms the corner for our square. And those 3 DCs acts as the side of a square. Now making the second side of the square, that's second DC and then the third DC. And the set of these 3 DCs are called as granny cluster. So hereby whenever I say a granny cluster, which means we'll have 3 DCs. Again chain 2 and a granny cluster. This is the third side of the square. Again chain 2 and lastly we have the last side of the square with another granny cluster. Making the last chain 2 for the last corner of the square and then make a slip stitch onto the top of the chain 3, that is into the third chain. Now carry the yarn by making slip stitches in the next few stitches until you reach the first chain 2 space, and into this chain 2 space we are going to change the color. Whenever we are going to change the color, we should not trim the threads. We are going to carry the yarn throughout the project. Now insert the green color yarn as shown and secure the join. Now make chain 3 as the beginning of the second row and do another 2 double crochet stitches to complete the granny cluster. And as this one is being a corner for the second row, make chain 2 to create the corner and make one more granny cluster into the same chain 2 space. That's second DC and then the third DC. And remember to carry your yarn while working it. Include the yellow color thread into the work while you are working your next row. Now without any chain space, insert your hook into the next chain 2 space. Carry the yellow color thread along with your work. And into the next chain 2 space, we are going to work a granny cluster increase. That is 1 granny cluster, chain 2 to get the corner, and 1 more granny cluster into the same chain 2 space. Now that's the second double crochet stitch in the granny cluster and finally the third one. Then carry your yellow color yarn through the next chain 2 space and make a granny cluster increase into the next chain 2 space. That's 1 DC, 2 and 3. Then chain 2 space, again another granny cluster into the same chain 2 space. And for the second row we don't have any color changes except at the beginning. Now repeat the same process with the last corner of the square as well. Carry the yellow color thread and make granny cluster increase. That is 3 DC, chain 2 and 3 DCs. Now this completes the last corner. Now let's attach it to the first chain 3 with a slip stitch. Now carry the yellow color thread and continue to make slip stitches across the first granny cluster until you reach the chain gap. Now here into the chain 2 space we are going to change the color. So grab the yellow color thread from behind and do not worry about the tail end. We are going to cover this by the end of the row. Now insert the yarn and grab the yellow color thread instead of the green one. Drop the green color thread, grab yellow color yarn and draw the loop through this green color loop. Now let's start making the third round. Begin with chain 3. We are going to carry the other color thread throughout the project, so whenever it is required we are going to change the color to the opposite color. So likewise, insert the green color yarn across the chain 2 space while you are working the corner and throughout the project as well. So first granny cluster, then chain 2 as it is a corner, and again into the same chain 2 space make another granny cluster. In other words, we will say it as a granny cluster increase. Now here we are going to change the color just before you complete the last DC. So drop the yellow color yarn, take the green yarn and change the color as shown. Now without any chain gap, into the gap in between the granny clusters in previous row, we are going to make one more granny cluster. Just like a regular granny square, but with the color changes. Now just before you complete the last DC of green color, change the color to yellow and continue to work, and do not forget to carry your yarn throughout the work. So here I have included the green color yarn while working with the yellow color thread. Again a granny cluster increase into the corner. So 3 DCs, chain 2 and 3 DC. And just before you complete the third double crochet stitch, change the color to green while you have just 2 loops on the hook. Drop the yellow loop to the front, grab the green color yarn from behind and complete the double crochet stitch. Now carry the yellow color thread across the side of the square, and now in between the gaps of a granny cluster, make one granny cluster with green color. Again, just before you complete the third DC, change the color to yellow. Drop the green color thread and grab yellow color and carry the green color thread through the next chain 2 space. That's the corner. Then again we have a granny cluster increase. Now we are going to repeat this process on the other sides of the square as well. So here we are doing the granny cluster increase in the corner, and just before the color change, complete it with a color change and 3 DCs into the space in between the granny clusters. Again the color change right before we complete the third DC. Carry the green color yarn and making the next corner of granny cluster increase. So 3 DCs, chain 2 for the corner and then one more 3 DC. Again change the color to green just before you complete the third DC. Drop the yellow color thread, grab the green color one and complete the granny cluster. And again remember the first yellow color thread which we have dropped from the last row. Include that tail end and complete your last granny cluster. Now just before you complete the last green square, drop the green color thread and grab yellow color just before you make a slip stitch onto the first stitch. Now continue to make slip stitches until you reach your chain 2 space, and into the chain 2 space change the color to green color and drop the yellow color thread, and this completes your third row. And this is how the granny diamond looks like after completing 3 rows. We have just started to make the diamonds, and now for the next row we are going to begin with this green color yarn and making the first granny cluster. So chain 3 as first DC and 2 more DCs to complete the granny cluster. Chain 2 and one more granny cluster into the same chain 2 space. From this row, I have increased the speed of the video, and if you feel the video is going faster, adjust the playback settings on YouTube. So now I have changed the color to yellow and going to do the next 2 granny clusters using this yellow color. Now carry the green color yarn along the work, and now into the next granny cluster gap, make 1 granny cluster in yellow color. Again another granny cluster into the next gap. And as we are increasing the number of rows, the number of granny clusters on the side of the square will increase. Now change the color to green color and carry the yellow color yarn across the chain 2 space, and then make a granny cluster increase into the corner and chain 2, and then make another granny cluster into the same chain 2 space. Then change the color before you complete your third DC. Put the green color yarn to the front and grab the yellow color thread. Now carry the green color yarn across the side of the square. Make 2 granny clusters in the next 2 spaces. That is the gap in between the granny clusters. As we are not doing any chain, we will not have any chain space. We'll just have a little small gap in between the granny clusters. So just before you complete the third granny cluster, the third DC, change the color to green and carry the yarn to the other side. Now repeat this process of making green color granny clusters on the corner and yellow color granny clusters across the side throughout the row until you reach the starting point of this row. Now after making the last 2 sides as well, here I am making the last granny cluster of the 4th side of the square. Include this green color yarn before you complete the last cluster. That's 1 DC, second one, and finally the third DC. And just before you complete it, drop the yellow color yarn to the front and grab the green color yarn. Put this yellow yarn back side and make a slip stitch onto the first chain 3. Include the yellow color yarn while you are working. And now after you reach the chain 2 space, change the color to yellow color. Now drop the green color yarn and let's start making the next round using this yellow color yarn. Let's begin with a granny cluster increase on the corner, 3 DCs, chain 2 and 3 more DCs into the same chain 2 space. As I have said 3 DC, we are going to begin with chain 3, which is considered as first DC. So I have said that. Now change the color to green color yarn, grab the yellow thread across the side of a square, and into the next gap we are going to make a granny cluster in green color and change the color for the next granny cluster. And this row will have multiple number of color changes. So follow the pattern accordingly. Another granny cluster in yellow color. Again change the color to green. And the next granny cluster in green color. Carry the yellow thread along. And then to the corner. Again change the color to yellow. Just before you complete the last DC, change the color to yellow. And carry the green color yarn across the corner. And make a granny cluster increase completely in yellow color. That's 3 DCs, chain 2 and 3 more DC in the same color into the same chain 2 space. Again change the color to green. Drop yellow color thread, grab the green color yarn, and then in the next space make a granny cluster in green color yarn. Change the color to yellow. Then we have a yellow granny cluster in between the yellow clusters of previous row, and this forms the shape of a diamond of yellow color. Now drop the yellow color yarn and grab green color. Carry forward the yellow yarn and make a green cluster in the next space. Then change the color to yellow. And now in the last corner or chain 2 space, we are making a granny cluster increase in yellow color. That's 3 DC, chain 2 and 3 more DC. Now repeat this pattern throughout the row for 2 more sides until you reach the starting point. Now here I am making the last granny cluster of this row, and just before I complete the third DC, I am changing the color to yellow. Just remember, the pattern here just involves the color changes at correct points. So identify and make it accordingly. Now make a slip stitch onto the third chain of the first chain 3 and slip stitch until you reach the chain 2 space. If you wish, you can continue with the pattern by following the color pattern. If not, trim the excess threads here. Weave in those edges and you can use them as a little coasters or for any of your other major projects. And that's it. Your beautiful crochet diamond granny squares are ready. Join them together and create your beautiful crochet items like purse, handbag, cardigans, poncho, blankets and many more. I hope you all enjoyed watching this tutorial. Do give this pattern a try and let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. See you all in the next video.
Thank you for watching. Please like the video, share it and subscribe to diykraftz.